There's a telephone number that is available. First item of business is a 2022 general plan update. And the presenter is Jason Sanks. Jason.
Thank you, Vice Chair, Acting Chair, and good evening, Planning and Zoning Commissioners. It's been a bit. It's good to see everybody. Mr. Frazier, nice to see you and have you on with us at the Commission. I wanted to say thanks everyone for hopefully getting a chance to receive, and I'm not sure if you've had an opportunity to review the draft 2022 general plan update. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background. May come to you as a surprise, actually. We had a discussion towards the beginning of December, just very recently, about the city's intent to update the general plan and when we were going to do that. And then I spoke with Matthew and then I spoke with legal. And you may recall, most of you may recall the history on the 2010 general plan. So as we got into 2020, as we're approaching 2020, the city had identified that there would actually be, based on the election cycle and the prior adoption of the voters of the 2010 general plan, there was going to be a 6-month gap in basically the effective applicability of that document, and that we'd have a 6-month gap. And so by statutory requirement, we have to have an effective general plan. It would more or less have expired. So the city council, P&Z and staff moved pretty swift to get it readopted by council. And so we did a very light refresh on that document. We couldn't do any substantive content changes because it would have really required a more thorough vetting, if you will, of the public hearing process. So we just refreshed the presentation of it and ensured that the land use map had been updated. As you likely know, the city doesn't have an in-house GIS department as large as cities do. So we got that map updated, and more or less the council readopted the 2010 general plan with the same content, goals, policies, objectives as it had been on the books, and bought us more time. And so, we looked at in 2021 when Pam was before Pam retired, even actually before Matthew was city manager, we had looked at re-engaging to start the 2020 general plan rewrite, and then COVID hit. So we had to put it again on the back burner because we were concerned at that time that if we were going to redo the document, we didn't really have a reasonable citizen review engagement process that we could do, because we hadn't really gotten acclimated to Zoom. Now I think you only know me as Zoom. I really am larger than a thumbnail in real life. But we've gotten pretty good at it. And so between that, and then depending on how things go in the next few months, we can do a hybrid of sorts of in-person meetings. So the function of the general plan is to really establish the guiding visionary document for the city when it contemplates policy, particularly as it relates to land use, but other aspects of city policy, and for the next 10 years or so. And the idea being that every 10 years, the city really needs to stop what they're doing based on statutory requirements, reevaluate this guiding document, and give it a refresh. It can be a ground up rewrite, or it can be a refresh. You can call it as you wish. In 2010, what the city did is, it's interesting going back in time and reading some of the discussion points and even the document itself, and how it characterizes the city as basically being built out. We're kind of, people are remodeling their houses. We don't expect anything big to happen. And then 2014 hit, and we got 6 major general plan amendments. We got hit by, the 80-acre commercial piece that wanted to turn residential up. We're now Sunset Terraces. We ended up getting the Thrice Marketplace since that time. The massive Sun Health development came in and did a general plan amendment and a massive rezoning case proposing, basically adding almost 20% population over the next 10 years to the city. The Wigwam wanted to convert portions of its golf course into condominium units. Litchfield Square, City Center. If you remember, just roll that clock back 10 years, and 10 years ago, it was this big giant dirt lot. We didn't even own it. So much has happened in 10 years. And so fortunately, in the 2010 general plan, although it contemplated a kind of a build out situation, what it really also did is it had all these goals, objectives, and policies about, we would love a vibrant city center. And, if we were going to have a vibrant city center, we should go about facilitating its development through X, Y, and Z. And that's what the general plan does. So that said, We quickly mobilized in the past 5 weeks to prepare a draft for what's called the 60-day agency review. So as part of the statutory calendar, if you will, of how you process a general plan from development to adoption, you have to get the document in front of partner agencies. And I admit, for us, it's a really short list. You've got Arizona Department of Water Resources, you've got the county, you've got adjacent jurisdictions, you've got Luke Air Force Base, and then you have the P&Z Commission, you have the council. So everyone that's on that list gets a copy of it 60 days in advance of the notice of the first public hearing for P&Z to be sent out. So with that said, what I'll probably do is I'm going to go ahead and toggle over to a brief PDF. It's a PowerPoint, but I converted it to PDF so it wouldn't get wonky with Zoom. And I'm going to present that to you, and we can go through the calendar and then kind of an overview of what the general plan does, items to consider, how we can participate in a relatively quite abbreviated schedule, and then what's the deliverable, which is the 2022 general plan. So I'm going to go ahead and start a share screen. Give me 1 second, and I'll toggle it. If any of you have any problems in terms of viewing ratios, just let me know. But I've tried to size the screen to my monitor so you can make the most of your monitor. Okay, so you should be able to see the 2022 general plan, and I've called it the 60-day agency review because that's the draft that you currently have. We got last week, and I do apologize for the two commissioners whose names fell off the acknowledgements page. The conversion from Word to PDF in advance of sending that out blocked out the two lower names. So hopefully the refresh document that Daniel sent with notice of tonight's study session should include the two names. So that's the only change since the document was distributed for agency review on January 3rd. So getting right into the schedule of things, it is a quick schedule. The intention here is that Matthew and the council would like to get caught up, if you will, on the general plan. And we believe we're confident in our ability to manage public input, public meetings, hearings, and ultimately council approval through a combination of Zoom and hybrid meetings in person, situation, permitting, that we can accomplish as much in person as possible. Otherwise, we'll do it through Zoom. So the 3rd of January kicked off the 60-day agency review, and that's when you received the general plan. I think it was like a week and a half ago, or a week ago on Monday. We'll have citizen review, our second study session at P&Z, where we can really jump in a bit further with your concepts and ideas of what you'd like this document to do and accomplish, and how I can make sure that that content is added or adjusted within the document. Tonight's more of an intro kickoff. We'll be heading towards what will likely be a special P&Z public hearing on or around March 22nd. We'll have a special council public hearing either on the 23rd or the 30th. Our drop dead date for this election cycle is actually April 4th. So we want to give us at least a couple of days of breathing room. And the reason that April 4th date is important is that would be the deadline for council to approve an ordinance or a resolution adopting the 2022 general plan in sufficient time so that we can prepare the publicity pamphlet that would be due to the Maricopa County, and then ultimately to make it to the August 2nd election cycle. If we don't make it, if for whatever reason we don't make it, all is not for naught. It would be bumped until the 2024 election cycle, giving us 2 more years. But my advisement at this current time is like, let's just get it done. Let's get it done this year on the 2022 election cycle. Hence, you receiving the document last week. So that said, that's an overview of the schedule. If you have any questions on the schedule, please do let me know. There's possibility for some additional meetings in here. There may be a general plan sort of open house, like an additional citizen review session or a couple of them that would be stacked somewhere in February and March. So long as we do those in advance of the special P&Z public hearing, we can gather input and advance notice so that when you get your staff report and the final draft for your action at the 22nd of March, we've reached out to the public, we've assimilated all of their input and put it into the final draft of the document in time for you to take action for council. We have not changed the city's mission statement. You may have heard on several occasions that The mayor has read this mission statement, and several of his in our discussions in several council meetings when taking land use actions, he says together through responsible. It says government in the document, but I think the correct term actually should be governance, so I changed it. I'll let the attorneys tell me if that's right. And citizen involvement, we will enhance the city of Litchfield Park while preserving the city's unique beauty, heritage, and community values fostered by our founder, Paul Litchfield. So it really recognizes the intent of the city's mission, and it's really the leading statement of the general plan. And from there, all else falls into place, and that's the intent of the mission statement. The components of the introduction and the general plan, as you've seen in the document, is that we restate the city's mission statement. We identify what the goal of the document is. We identify the city's context in Metro Phoenix, so you can start to stitch together where we place in the larger urban area. We describe Litchfield Park as an urban oasis, its design, its quality of life, its historical context, and its background as basically the first and one of the most successful and most long-living master plan communities in the entire state. We identify community pride, our regional partnerships, and demographic data. Just for fun, I've added the 2020 demographic data to this slide. I think it's important. I stated earlier that the general tone during the 2010 process appeared to be that Litchfield Park kind of identified itself as being built out because it's landlocked. However, within its boundaries, a lot has happened. So we've experienced nearly 25% population growth since 2010. We're probably going to experience another 20% by or around 2030. We've got Sun Health that's going to bring on 1,300 units. You've got Litchfield Square that may or may not, likely to include some element of multifamily housing. We have the 15 acres that's still owned by JDM that is proposed to be commercial and multifamily housing. And at some point in the future, we anticipate that JDM will come back and want to do those condos that they got the general plan amendment for. They never came back after they got that major general plan amendment, but there has been talks, and not to dig too deep since it's not on the agenda, but as you can imagine, all of these different development components, these units don't exist in the city yet. Those people don't live here yet, but when they do get built, those people are going to move in. And our population of 5,800 is going to swell up to 7,000, 8,000 people. And so when we contemplate, oh, we're small, we're built out, we're really not. So we need to continue to be sitting not on the edge of our seat, but be mindful that our visionary document does matter. We're not just remodeling houses in Litchfield Park and, doing a little bit of redevelopment. We actually have new ground up development coming our way in the next 10 years. Some data that shouldn't come as a big surprise. We generally find that the population of Litchfield Park has a higher rate of home ownership, higher rate of educational attainment, and generally speaking, makes more money. We also have a really high rate of households with a computer and with internet service in the home. Fortunately for all of us, we have internet service, obviously, since we're able to hold these meetings. But this bodes well for when we do want to say, hey, can we reasonably hold citizen review, through Zoom? I think with 91% of our residents having a computer and internet service, that says quite a bit about our ability to engage with citizens through the internet. But as I said earlier, we will also do in person for those that prefer in person. Some kind of review of what the general plan is required to have for the state of Arizona and its statutory requirements of a general plan. This legislation was passed back 2002 that requires us to have a general plan. It was broadly speaking intended to really guide some of these cities that were leapfrogging development, urban sprawl and growth, and how to kind of manage it more responsibly. And the state identified different thresholds of population for how large and robust their general plan would need to be. And so for our city and our size, we're required to have a community character element, land use, circulation, open space. Open space, I've elaborated further in the document to be parks, rec, and open space, so people can have a better idea of how that element more broadly needs to address the city's vision of parks, rec, and open space. Growth and development, environmental resources, water resources, and cost of development. Now, when we do, for example, rezoning cases and we evaluate, this guy wants to rezone his property from one zoning district to another, or for example, the larger example of Sun Health, That was a very large zoning case. And a lot of our conversation when we evaluate land use cases is spent in the land use element. That's where all of the commercial, residential, single family, multifamily, industrial, public facility stuff, a lot of that discussion kind of hubs, if you will, in the land use element. But that large case, for example, touches on many elements of the general plan. And ultimately, when we make recommendations, staff does to the P&Z does to council, we contemplate all of the guiding principles and objectives and strategies of all of these elements when making our decisions. From these elements, we get things like the full zoning ordinance or subdivision regulations or individual zoning decisions and on individual properties. All of that is sourced from the elements here on the screen. Within each element, we have three primary components. One is the guiding principle. Two is a discussion related to that guiding principle and what are our objectives. So what we've gone is we've established three components that take us from a vision. And how do we get to a point where we start to see it materialize in how we conduct business and how we make decisions? So through its guiding principles, discussion, objectives, it really does provide the roadmap for us in land use decisions and policymaking. And policymaking can include broader things than just, do we support a zoning case? It can facilitate items like, well, how much money does the city want to retain in the bank so that we can pay for Litchfield Square, right? You can imagine how many different ways this materializes. An item that came up and hit the city pretty hard back in 2014 and has resurfaced a few times since is major general plan amendments and minor general plan amendments. There's two ways in which we update the land use map or the text of our document, and it's through minors and majors. Another way we do it is by simply rewriting the document, as this exercise is. But as a reminder, we're not changing or proposing to change the way we do major general plan amendments. And with us being quite small, we consider these three items as majors, which means they need to be filed usually by the end of May. We're taking the new schedule to council on the 19th for this year. We adopt a new schedule every year. So by the end of May, all of the applicants interested or owners or whomever is interested in doing what we call a major amendment must file by the end of May. We do the 60-day review for them, and we ultimately are required to have a hearing with them all on the agenda by the end of the year. The calendar year for which they're filed. So just to refresh everyone's memory, majors consider redesignation of land from a residential land use designation to a commercial or industrial designation, or from a commercial industrial land use designation to a residential land use designation. That's a pretty broad category. So a lot of our stuff and a lot of our business falls into that bucket. We haven't proposed to change it because I believe it's been the intent of P&Z and council for a long time to consider these majors because they do have a major impact on us. A change in intensity. So we're looking at designating property from one residential land use designation to another in the context of increasing density by 20% or greater. So any change, like if I want to go from single family residential to multifamily residential and bump that density up, that would have an impact on all of our services, our calls for police, it would be emergency services, demand for parks and rec, what's happening at the rec center. All types of city services could be impacted. So you add more people, they need more services. It's a change in intensity, therefore considered a major. Last, and certainly not least, we saw this in 2014, taking open space or golf course designation and turning it to basically anything else. How do we preserve and maintain our golf courses and our open space as they are? And if there is a provision to amend that, but we would consider it a major so that it gets the time and evaluation that it deserves. That said, if it's not considered a major, it's a minor. So just keep that in mind, all else is minor. So a minor means you don't have a 60-day review and you don't have the one time a year threshold where you need to file by end of May. You could file a minor general plan amendment any time of year. Last, in the general plan document you received, you'll see a chart of objectives, timing, and implementation strategies. Every general plan should have this. Again, this is kind of finaling out how you take from the vision. You've identified your guiding principles, your objectives, and then how are you going to really put this vision to paper? How are you going to take the paper and put it on the land? And that would be take that objective, identify the timing that you believe is associated with it, and then identify all of the implementation strategies. And I'll give you a real example that we just recently did in 2019 And think about Litchfield Square. How did Litchfield Square materialize besides a broad vision that the city had that the downtown should develop from, more than a dirt lot into a vibrant city center? It's been the thought for many, many years. But the 2010 general plan had goals, policies, and objectives and strategies to get there. What we did back in 2019 is, it's actually dating back to 2015, we started developing the city center zoning district. We did a major general plan amendment and we began master planning. All of that, really, that function and that process started from the general plan and materialized, not just ending with adoption of a zoning district, rezoning that property, establishing development standards. You may recall we talked about changing building heights, bringing buildings to the street, what types of land uses we wanted there, building form and architecture, streetscapes, all of those things. That all materialized because the general plan had a vision. We had an implementation strategy. We completed that. And now we have Litchfield Square under construction. So that's where it goes. So you can kind of see where the general plan fits in the context of the city accomplishing its goals with land use. I've got a Q&A slide here too, but I wanted to bring up and toggle over to the Litchfield Park general plan itself. Now, I hope you've had a chance to take a look at it. I do have it watermarked with 60-day draft on it, so as not to confuse it with the draft that will go out for citizen review next month. But I wanted to have the document up on my screen so that I can answer questions. And hopefully between tonight, if you have comments to offer, would be wonderful in terms of what you might see or may wish to see in the document that we can add to it. Or we can carry the conversation into citizen review next month. But I have the document up now so we can talk about what I've completed with this document since the 2010 general plan. That is, we've refreshed the document to be in the format and context of how we've done the zoning ordinance rewrite. So the fonts, the headers, the design, all of that should start to sound familiar now that we've kind of refreshed it and it doesn't feel like an old version of Word. It's more contemporary and should be somewhat more familiar looking to you. I'm going to see if I can kind of adjust the settings on my screen here. But you can see we've got the acknowledgements page, which is pretty standard. And then the table of contents, all of this stuff has been reorganized and refreshed so that it looks, I just brought the structure over from the zoning ordinance rewrite, which is another, as you know, very large endeavor that we're bringing back to the P&Z and council here shortly in the early part of this year. You can see the amendments, the amendments in process, and all of the elements are spelled out here. And then the implementation and action strategies. And we're working now on updated graphics. The land use map is already done, as I said earlier. We'll be working on a new circulation plan and a new open space plan to be a recreation parks and open space plan. So those two will hopefully be ready in time for citizen review, if not certainly by the time we bring it back for public hearing in March. So that I'd be happy to answer questions. I know I've been a little long-winded, but wanted to kind of give you the background and context of where we've gone with the document and where it's headed to. And what I would ask from staff's perspective is any input or concepts you have, there's no wrong concept or idea, anything that you have that you'd like to throw out there, I'll be writing notes. Any discussion points I'll be writing down. We may not have a lot of discussion or we may, but I'd like to open it up and just get your opinion on what you'd like to see happen with our general plan. We'll be with it for the next 8 years until we get to 2030. We'll probably kick off and get it back on a 2030 cycle. We won't have this weird 18 months that we've had again, I hope, by the time 2030 rolls around and I'm a lot older. So that said, feel free to comment if you like, and I'll be happy to answer questions. There's a lot here, and I can toggle back to let me go back to the presentation.
Do we have any questions from the commission? Any commissioners? Go ahead, Deb.
I have quite a few comments. I did go through it word by word. And I don't know if you want to take time tonight, if this would be appropriate to correct some typos or bring those to your attention, or if it would be better to just submit something to the staff.
Yeah, I would suggest if I may, through the chair, Faith, Commissioner Lawrence, speak, and I appreciate you I love the idea that you might be wordsmithing a bit. That's fantastic because we need that. We really were over the Christmas holiday and the New Year's holiday. You received it right after New Year's. We had about 3 weeks notice to really turn it around. So we met our statutory requirement and got the meat and potatoes of this revised document out.
Right.
It's been sent to legal, those sorts of things. So as we refine it between now, or actually the 3rd, and the time it comes back to, please do send whatever you like to Daniel, and we'll be keeping a citizen review file going. So not only comments from the commissioners, but council members and members of the public and partner agencies over the next 60 days will be piling in. So we'll put it all together.
Great. I did have a couple other comments. When I first received the note, the email dated January 11th today, and it says the city has initiated the 60-day agency review process. And I was wondering, whatever we send out, if it would be good to mention the date. As of January 3rd, 2022, the city has initiated the 60-day review process, just to reinforce what the start date was of that.
Okay, so are you saying, I apologize to the chair, Commissioner Lawrence. So you're talking about the email you received today or the email you received on the 3rd? Because the third email on the 3rd,
right?
What?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about the email today. So it just,
oh, yeah,
anything that we send out, should probably mention the date, the start date, just to kind of reinforce it started January 3rd.
Sure. All right. Daniel and I will take note of that.
Great.
So I can kind of describe to you what happened on the 3rd. There was a series of emails that were sent out. So the commission got their copy in one bundle, if you will, as a component of the 60-day agency review. And then council got it in their bundle. And then the partner agencies got it all separately individually. And so they all stated, here's your 60-day review kicking off on the 3rd. So we'll make sure we'll tidy up the communication on the dates and deadlines.
Great. The map that is on page, I'm only mentioning the comments I think are substantive to, the actual package, but the map, and I realize how much work has been put into this and what you've been.
Oh, sure. No, please. I'm making notes.
Yeah. And the maps that are in the back at the end of the document are really good. The map that's on page 5 is rather crude, and from the point of view that it, like Wigwam, looks like it's equal with Indian School. There's, a few changes, that I'd make. Also, maybe it would be helpful since you have the key down here, and I was looking at the key, and that's great, but maybe you might want to think about identifying on that map, if you're going to keep it in there, some of the points like major development, or just to give people a point of reference, like here's, the Wigwam Resort, here's existing town development, here's La Loma, here's the Litchfield Park Historical Society. I know they're changing their name, but anyway, just to identify.
The Paul W. Litchfield, yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yes, and actually, Commissioner Lawrence, we are actually replacing the context map altogether. It's very dated.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll be honest, it's transparent. We weren't able to mobilize the design firm that I work with to do that over Christmas for me. So I had to take the one that's existing and reuse it. So I was like, oh, I didn't want to, but
you were hoping I wouldn't notice. I know.
No, I just I wanted something that looked a little bit more sophisticated. But no offense to the people that prepared it 12 years ago.
Oh no, this is a lot of work. So then the other thing too is that I wonder if anyone else just had wondered what are the boundaries? You mentioned the boundaries of Litchfield Park, and what are the boundaries of Litchfield Park that are covered in this plan? Is it everything that's shown, the little piece down where Dignity Health is? Is it Litchfield Greens? Is it, all of these areas? Or because when you do the whole description of Litchfield Park, it sounds like it's just within the quote, the park.
Oh, you're right. Let me pull up the land use
apply to
map.
these other areas. Yeah.
I have the land use map. Just give me 1 second if you don't mind, and I'll pull it up.
The only description I found so far is that it lies north of Interstate 10. It's very broad. And I was wondering if it might be helpful to further define what the boundaries are.
Sure, I'll bring up the land use map here. Give me 1 second to up on my screen. So this was the land use map that we refreshed right before council readopted it. Because we hadn't really updated it in many, many years because we just the city didn't engage the GIS person to kind of redo it since I think almost 2010. We just kind of remembered what we'd done. So after 2014, I actually added a bunch of labels to the land use map. You can hardly see them here. You see them when it's larger, but I can change the font size. I actually labeled Monument Point Business Park, the Sun Health Loma campus, the PW Litchfield Center, the Wigwam Resort and Spa, City Center will be renamed to Litchfield Square. We've got a couple of them noted here, and then it shows some of the areas that are not annexed, but are within our planning area.
Right.
So this would be the more comprehensive view of the general plan's land use planning area.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's in the.
So I would just suggest that under section 1.2 context,
Yep.
that it references the map. If you don't describe, it's the area that lies north of this, east of that, west of that, south, et cetera,
Okay.
or the major arterials. And yeah, on that one map too, that I had mentioned previously, I know it had major arterials that mentioned Litchfield Road, but it didn't say anything about Dysart. It showed Dysart just down to the end of Litchfield, didn't
This one.
continue it down farther south. So,
Oh, I see. Yes, this is the map you're referring to.
so anyway, but I know now that you're going to be replacing that. So
Yeah.
never mind.
Yeah, it does look a little bit like a relic, I admit. So, all right. Thank you for this comment. So this really helps because it helps, with when everyone has their heads in the document, it really helps us know where we can polish or add substantive material and polish too.
Right. So, like I said, I'm not going to mention the typos or anything like that because they're minor points. I don't want to take up the time with that. But there is on page 12 of the document, or I'm sorry, it's page 11.
Okay.
Under 3 rezoning ordinances, it appears that there's an incomplete sentence at the end of that paragraph. It says small acreage deviations from the designated, and then there's nothing further. It doesn't continue. The rest of the page is blank and it doesn't continue on to the next page.
Oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Let me see if this also was a Word to PDF issue. And then when I added the watermark, it kind of got a little wonky. So I will check and see what happened with the text for the end of item 3, page 11.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I had one more, just a moment.
I did stop screen share, Commissioner Lawrence, but I'm actually looking at the document while you tell me so I can note it.
Right, no worries. Section 3.403, and that is on page.
Objectives under circulation or Parks and Rec. Okay.
It's under objectives.
Yes.
And it does say gold. I think that is intended to be golf on the, let's see. I'm sorry, that's not the one. Hold on.
No.
I know there's a gold course. That's why I hesitated for a moment, but I think it is, you intended golf, but anyway, I'll put that under the typos or whatever, and you can look at that and see what's the correct use of that.
Okay.
And
We did capitalize the word golf under 3.403 objectives, so not certain. I'll do a screening of this section to look for that.
I think you're looking for 3.203 in the third bullet point. You've got the word gold. Looks like maybe it should be gold.
that's right. It's in the third bullet. Use is reflective of the gold, and I think it should be golf. Thank you for doing that for me.
3.203.
3.203 third bullet, halfway down.
Oh, that's interesting because that came. Oh, thank you for. Yeah, that's right there. That should be
thanks.
golf. I hope that's not in the general plan still already. I think that came over. Good catch. So I'll make sure to update that. This is our opportunity to fix something that may be on the books already. That's the if you may recall when we did that major general plan amendment for the 15 acres at the northwest corner of Litchfield Road and Wigwam Boulevard. That's when we adopted this language.
Okay. The other thing too is that in like section 4.1, you call it an action summary, and 4.3 an action schedule, and 4.5 an action strategy matrix. And just for consistency, I thought you might want to choose one.
Okay.
Just as a thought.
If you could restate that again, I've got, oh, I see what you mean. We call it the action summary. I got you.
An action schedule and then action strategy matrix.
Okay.
And I had a question about a couple places it refers to the Litchfield Road bypass. And I was wondering, where exactly is that?
That is a carryover from the prior document. Let me, let me scroll. If you have the page number handy, that would be helpful, but I could look. The bypass, well, we've got the overpass, which is, or the bypass, which goes under Litchfield Road, which connects the 15 acres.
Litchfield Road bypass is Indian School now.
Oh, you're talking about the Indian School Road. Okay. I haven't really used that terminology myself when we're evaluating. So if any of this terminology sounds a little bit dated, please let me know and I can change it.
Mr. Fraser, you got a question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm relatively new to Litchfield, but as I understand it, the Litchfield bypass is the current alignment of Litchfield Road that snakes through by the greens. It was designed so that old Litchfield Road was not going to be utilized. So if you actually look at the alignment of Litchfield Road coming up from I-10, it would run right through the middle of town.
You're right. Yep.
So they designed a bypass around it. That's why it kind of S-curves by the Litchfield.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That makes sense. We have Old Litchfield Road and regular. I don't think it's called New Litchfield Road. It's just Litchfield. Gotcha.
Right. Anyway, that's all I had other than the ones that, should I send those to Daniel then?
Sure. Yes, please.
Great. Thanks.
You're welcome to copy me as well if you'd like, or you can just send it straight to Daniel and I'll sweep all of that in. I'm making notes here.
Any other questions from the commission?
Chair, this is Brian. May I ask a quick question?
Go for it.
Jason, I'm not sure if this is relevant, but would it make sense to have a reference to a map of the areas within 85340 that aren't included in this?
Do you mean like
Russell Ranch, these other areas that, have a Litchfield Park address, right? But they're not incorporated in, I don't know. I'm just wondering if there's any relevance to have any reference for that in this.
Well, I think the zip code issue has caused quite a bit of concern not concern, but some confusion for a long time. I know that the city gets calls from people that think they're in the city, but they're not in the city because they have a Litchfield Park address. I think what we could do is we could do a statement and perhaps some sort of a map to kind of clear that up. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I would say that there's certainly some confusion out there. So
okay.
I don't know if that was something that would help with some clarity. And then my other question is did you guys have any 1, 2, 3 specific things that you were hoping to get feedback from any of us?
I think what I'd like to encourage is that we don't get boxed in our own train of thought with the document itself as prepared, but rather if everyone can, imagine for a moment that we didn't have a general plan and we were going to create a general plan because we decided that we needed a document that was a visionary document for the city. I find our document spends a lot of time, and I understand why. It really revisits its own history. And the older document from way back in the early 2000s was much more robust and verbose and stuff like that. This one's a lot more succinct, and as desired by council 10 years ago, we've kept it that way. But to think about, like, what, from a land use perspective or a policy perspective, where do you see the city going from today, where we've been, where we're going to in the next 10 years? And maybe just don't think about it too much. Just jot down the first three things that come to mind. And then you could even just send it to Daniel. There's no wrong answer. There's no wrong comment. But rather, I can sort through objectives, policies, and those sorts of things and present them back to you if you just give me the concept and say, I think we need to address this. We talked to the zoning code review, Brian, about, we see seismic shifts in the way, we get our goods and services. How do we drive our vehicles? How do we fuel our vehicles? How do we make land use decisions, accommodating, new technologies and new ways of living? How does our guiding document accommodate that? And how do we adjust it to meet those needs? So if you think of that, like, just don't let the document, box you in. So, some people might say, we're very careful in Litchfield Park in regards to housing density, but let's just throw out other communities that have identified that they have a housing crisis and housing costs are ridiculous and they need to find more creative ways to accommodate growth, right? That's not been on the list so far with this effort, but I know in other places in California, for example, they've had to address the issues of housing costs and density. I don't know that that's here yet, but that's an idea. So they've gone through and they've done some massive restructuring to some of their visionary documents and how they accept density, for example, in multifamily developments. But that's just an example.
Commissioner Lawrence.
I have a question about some of the things that are not in here that have been discussed before, and that would be like the uses that would be allowed. That was a larger document that had a list of all possible uses, including maybe, but not limited to, and what would be appropriate uses downtown. So will the public be reviewing some of those documents at the same time they're reviewing the general plan? So the general plan will reference retail, but then they would also see maybe an addendum to that or whatever that would have, possible uses or allowed uses for downtown.
Well, Commissioner Lawrence, it's a good question about, well, if I can kind of put it together. The general plan will very broadly, imagine the general plan's up at like 30,000, 60,000 feet looking down at the city and guiding the city when it makes more localized decisions on land use. The use lists are in the zoning code, which we've talked about through a number of study sessions, and we've reviewed those. We're starting to run tandem now with the 2022 general plan, which is this document, and the zoning code update. We still have Susan Goodwin working on that on our behalf. And so she's going to be wrapped up in the next couple of months and done. So we'll be bringing that forward at almost the same time. So actually, yes, we may have them nearly in tandem. So we could say, we don't have itemized use lists in the general plan. That would be in the zoning code, where you have development standards like setbacks and building heights and permitted uses in every zoning district. So as the general plan will say commercial, but then the zoning code will say neighborhood commercial, community commercial, commercial flex, and city center. And those are all their uses. So that's how they relate.
Commissioner Albee. You're on mute still.
Hi,
There you go.
sorry. I know Jason, you mentioned density, but it sounds like density would be more of a zoning code type of thing. So what I know you mentioned California includes density to some extent in some of their general plans. Exactly how? What do they specifically?
I can explain that through the chair and Commissioner Albee. So how, for example, larger cities in Arizona, they also are required to, like, let's say the city of Phoenix, but due to its scale, there are additional elements that are required by statute. We don't have the requirement to provide what's called a housing element. So in a housing element, for example, you would talk about your housing stock, the state of the housing stock, where your housing needs are, how are you going to provide for it and accommodate for it? And do you have a cost issue? And are you providing the housing that your population needs? And then there could be goals, policies, and objectives and strategies, et cetera, to get there, right? We would support, we should support, create these policies to, let's say, develop more multifamily by doing X, Y, and Z. And then that's how it would materialize to maybe the creation or changing of certain zoning districts, whether we could encourage land use changes from, to higher density in certain types of locations. That's how the general plan would relate to that. Now in Litchfield Park, we've been very careful with the concept of density to maintain kind of a lower density environment, protection of our neighborhoods in terms of, we've talked about this before, do we allow second dwelling units and those sorts of things. So if we had goals and policies that say we need to accommodate growth, we need to address this housing cost problem, we want to do X, Y, and Z, we would do it. We could, update the zoning code to offer more development intensity in our residential zones. That's an example.
Okay.
And if you don't want that, if the city is taking a stand, as they generally have in the past, of really being out in the front on protection, of our neighborhoods in terms of density and land uses and keeping the intensity down, then we would not support upzoning a bunch of properties to multifamily, for example, from single family.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Jason, I have one comment for you. On the general plan land use map, those two houses that were just built north of Aleppo Park show as, under the general plan, as parks open space.
oh, okay. Let me
We
take a
should
look.
update that to, it looks like very low density residential, just for conformity.
Oh, okay. North of Aleppo Park. There might be a map error.
Yep.
Yeah, we rebuilt the general plan land use map in December of 2019. And because the original one had been done 10 years earlier and the CAD files were no longer available. So we basically rebuilt it. So there could be a mapping error. We can fix that. So there's two lots north of Aleppo that are showing as parks open space, or they're showing as
parks open space. Yeah.
showing as parks open space. Okay.
I think you're familiar with those two. Those two were just completed. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the open space at the east end of Sycamore and Elm, south of Village Parkway, it's not color coded. It should probably be color coded as green for open space. It's just white. It almost looks like a road.
Okay.
But that's all I can see with the map.
Okay, great. Yeah, if anybody wants to also mark up the map in either PDF view or even just hand sketch it and take a picture of it and send it over to us. If you notice any tiny things that we can fix, we'll certainly jump on that. I mean, I see minor stuff as well, like we can enhance the graphics and the line weights of our streets and those sorts of things.
Do we have any other questions from the commission? Go ahead, Mr. Frazier.
So just to give me a little history here, is it possible to get it sounds like you've changed or updated the existing general plans for this updated version. Could I get a track changes version of this? So that I can make an easy comparison of what language was added, potentially what language was taken out, and just get a sense of what has changed in the city since 2010 or 2014 and these other, large amendments that were made. Is that possible?
I could prepare, but the track changes would be a little different than giving you the Word version because I recreated it.
Okay, so you
In
pulled
Word. So aside from having like the old doc and the new doc side by side and kind of shopping for the changes, we actually can create that. And we've done that with the zoning code. So I can create one for the general plan. It's not a very long document, so it'd be easy enough to do. And I think we should have it anyhow for the case file. So we can say, if anybody says exactly what did you guys change from 2010 to 2022, we can show that.
Okay, and that's just helpful for me so that, I was not around in 2010, 2016, 2014, any of these major updates. I read through it. It sounds good, but I don't know the context of what has changed.
Actually, that's a good point to present. What were all the major GPAs that got processed, as well as some of the minors. We had some minor ones as well go through. So good changes. So what happened with the major GPAs when we're talking about 2014 is those were all map amendments. So the land use map, the colorized land that I'll share real quick. Hold on. This those were primarily map amendments. So one chunk would go from one land use to another, and that was based on the filing of an application. What also happened, for example, is like for this over here, we see the cross hatching. That was a map amendment and a text amendment to the general plan. And then what separately from all of that is from 2010 to 2022 is the content, the text of the general plan. I've had to refresh because we had a lot of references to things that are no longer relevant. We used to call this city center village, like village square, things like that. We don't call it that anymore. It's now city center and Litchfield Square. So all of that's been kind of reconciled. So I can get a track changes for both the map amendments and the applications that we got, and then also for the document refresh itself.
Okay, so I mean, it doesn't sound like there was any major language changes to anything in particular. You just,
There hasn't been any
conformity.
major like material changes in terms of adjusting the city's vision for growth.
Then I don't know. I mean, if you want to do the exercise and you think it's valuable for other people, we can.
Well, I don't know if I think it would be more of a summary, if you will, rather than an exact track changes. So it would be kind of a matrix.
Okay. It would just, if there's been no changes, I can just read it as a general plan and understand that it was just primary language updates and.
Sure. What you'll see is there's a lot of similarity between the two documents because of the statutory requirement to have certain contents, if you will. And so those contents follow in kind of a logical order of the introduction and the elements and the strategy implementations. And so you'll say, oh, these documents are structured very similarly, and that's because it's based on the statutory requirement.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commission? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that item of business. Move on to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any opposed? Not hearing any. This meeting is adjourned.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you, everybody.
Jason.
Don't forget to email me and Daniel if you have any ideas. Thanks.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Good night.